Welcome back to our channel, your premier destination for the most explosive updates and deep dives into the dramatic world of daytime television. Today is a magnificent day to unravel the latest jaw-dropping twists that have completely redefined the landscape of Los Angeles. Let us jump straight into the heart-pounding chaos that just unfolded at what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. The stained glass windows of the Grand Los Angeles Cathedral cast a kaleidoscope of vibrant, fractured light across the pristine marble floor, setting a deceptively serene stage for what was about to become the most catastrophic wedding ceremony in recent memory. While Spencer stood at the altar, his broad shoulders squared beneath a perfectly tailored tuxedo, trying desperately to project an image of unwavering certainty and romantic triumph. For months, his life had been a turbulent hurricane of violence, corporate betrayal, and profound heartbreak. From the violent implosion of his relationship with Electra Forrester to the horrifying moment he accidentally struck Eric Forrester during a bitter brawl with RJ, Will had been drowning in a sea of guilt and isolation. Melissa Dillon had been his life raft, the woman who had pulled him from the depths of his drunken depression and offered him a fresh start. Today was supposed to be the ultimate validation of their controversial love story, a definitive statement that he had finally moved on from the toxic shadows of his past. Melissa Dillon, radiating an ethereal beauty in her flowing, intricately laced white gown, glided down the massive aisle with the poised confidence of a woman who believed she had finally secured her ultimate victory. Her journey to this altar had been fraught with endless obstacles, fierce rivalries, and the relentless, suffocating scrutiny of the Spencer family. She had endured the absolute wrath of Katie Logan Spencer, who had brutally branded her a manipulative gold digger obsessed with the Spencer fortune. She had navigated the treacherous waters of Forrester Creations, risking her career and her former friendship with Electra to claim the man she wanted. As she walked toward Will, her eyes locked onto his, conveying a silent promise of a shared future. She had beaten the odds. She had weathered the storm. She was only moments away from officially becoming a member of one of the most powerful dynasties in the world. Sitting in the front pew, Darcy Dillon beamed with a fierce, almost defiant pride as she watched her daughter approach the altar. Darcy had flown into Los Angeles like a protective hurricane, summoned by Melissa to wage a ruthless matriarchal war against the formidable Katie Logan. Darcy had stood her ground against the Spencer matriarch, fiercely defending her daughter's intentions and demanding respect. Watching Melissa stand before the priest, Darcy felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. Her daughter was about to secure a life of unimaginable wealth, security, and prestige. The priest, a man of gentle demeanor and soothing cadence, raised his hands to quiet the murmuring congregation. He began to deliver the final, binding vows, his voice echoing softly through the cavernous sanctuary. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, every guest holding their breath as the ceremony reached its absolute climax. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The priest intoned, the traditional words hanging in the heavy air. For a fleeting, breathless second, there was absolute silence. Will smiled warmly at Melissa, reaching out to gently squeeze her trembling hands. But before the priest could utter the final pronouncement that would cement their union, the heavy, centuries-old oak doors at the back of the cathedral did not merely open. They were thrust apart with a resounding, thunderous boom that echoed through the sanctuary like a cannon shot. The sudden, violent noise caused the entire congregation to jump, heads whipping around in collective shock and horror to see who had dared to interrupt the sacred moment. Standing in the threshold, silhouetted against the bright California sunlight pouring in from outside, was the unmistakable, imposing figure of Dollar Bill Spencer. The patriarch of the Spencer media empire stepped into the cathedral, his presence immediately sucking all the oxygen out of the massive room. What made Bill's entrance so profoundly terrifying was the absolute, chilling calmness of his demeanor. There was no shouting, no veins bulging in his neck, no frantic waving of arms, and no deployment of physical violence. He moved with the slow, deliberate, and lethal grace of an apex predator that had already cornered its prey. He was dressed immaculately, his expression carved from solid ice, radiating a dark, unstoppable authority that demanded absolute submission from everyone in his path. In his right hand, Bill held a remarkably thick, meticulously organized manila folder. To the untrained eye, it was merely a collection of mundane documents. But to those who truly understood the ruthless, Machiavellian depths of Bill Spencer, that folder was recognized instantly as a weapon of mass destruction. It was the physical manifestation of the Spencer Empire's endless resources, their unparalleled ability to dig up the deepest, darkest secrets of anyone who dared to cross their path. Bill began his slow, agonizingly deliberate walk down the long center aisle. The rhythmic, echoing click of his expensive leather shoes against the marble floor sounded like the ticking of a doomsday clock. The guests parted like the Red Sea, shrinking back into the pews to avoid the icy wrath radiating from the media mogul. Will, his heart pounding violently against his ribs, stepped forward, instinctively shielding Melissa with his body. His voice was a volatile mixture of profound confusion and rapidly rising anger as he demanded to know what his father was doing. He pleaded with Bill, his voice echoing in the silent church, begging him not to ruin the most important day of his life. Will had expected Katie to cause a scene, perhaps even expected Ridge Forrester to stage a protest, but he had never anticipated that his own father, the man who had previously advised him to play the field and ignore the Forrester hypocrisy, would be the one to crash the ceremony. Bill, however, completely ignored his son's desperate pleas. His piercing, cold gaze bypassed Will entirely and locked onto the pale, trembling figure of Melissa Dillon. Bypassing the emotional pleas of his son, Bill stopped mere feet from the altar. With a voice that was eerily quiet yet resonated with undeniable, terrifying authority, Bill began to speak. He did not speak of love, or compatibility, or the sanctity of marriage. Instead, Bill calmly opened the thick folder and began to recite a meticulously documented history of dark, undeniable financial crimes. He revealed that his extensive network of private investigators had spent the last several weeks digging into the shadows of the Dillon family tree. What they found was not merely a history of opportunistic gold digging, but a highly sophisticated, shocking financial fraud that had left a trail of ruined lives and empty bank accounts in its wake. And the mastermind behind this devastating scam was none other than Darcy Dillon. Bill's voice remained dangerously level as he listed the undeniable evidence contained within the heavy folder. He detailed offshore bank accounts, sophisticated wire frauds, forged corporate documents, and a series of fake identities that Darcy had allegedly used to orchestrate a massive financial scam years prior. The evidence was absolute, undeniable, and utterly damning. He read out dates, specific financial figures, and the names of the victims who had been ruthlessly exploited. Every single word that left Bill's mouth was a calculated, lethal strike aimed directly at the foundation of Melissa and Darcy's lives. He painted a horrifying picture of a mother who was not merely protective, but a hardened, calculating criminal who had managed to evade justice for years by hiding in the shadows. Darcy's defiant pride, the arrogant armor she had worn since arriving in Los Angeles to battle Katie Logan, shattered in an instant. The color violently drained from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. She gasped, clutching the wooden pew in front of her as her knees threatened to buckle beneath her weight. The fiercely protective mother who had marched into the city ready to wage a glamorous war was now reduced to a trembling, cornered animal staring directly into the headlights of her own destruction. She knew, with absolute, terrifying certainty, that Bill Spencer possessed the power, the influence, and the undeniable proof to completely obliterate her life and send her to a federal penitentiary for decades. Bill Spencer, never one to leave a job half-finished, closed the folder with a sharp, definitive snap and delivered his ultimate, devastating ultimatum. He looked Melissa dead in the eye, his gaze completely devoid of any warmth or empathy, and laid out the terms of her surrender with chilling precision. He told her that she had exactly two choices. She could proceed with the wedding, say her vows, and become Mrs. Will Spencer. But the very second the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Bill would hand the thick folder over to his contacts at the FBI and the local authorities. He promised, with absolute certainty, that Darcy Dillon would be arrested before the wedding reception even began, and that she would spend the rest of her natural life rotting in a prison cell. Alternatively, Bill offered her a second, agonizing option. She could turn around, walk out of the cathedral doors right now, and disappear from Will's life forever. If she agreed to vanish, to completely sever all ties with the Spencer family and never return to Los Angeles, Bill would lock the folder away in his private vault. He would bury the evidence of Darcy's shocking financial scam, allowing her mother to remain free. It was a flawless, inescapable trap. Bill had not used his fists or his security team to stop the wedding. He had used the ultimate psychological weapon. He had forced Melissa to choose between her own romantic ambitions and the absolute freedom and survival of her mother. Melissa was suddenly paralyzed, trapped in an agonizing, impossible psychological vice. The silence in the cathedral was deafening, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on every single person in the room. Her breathing became shallow, erratic gasps, as the sheer magnitude of her defeat washed over her. She looked at her mother, seeing the absolute terror and silent pleading in Darcy's wide, tear-filled eyes. Then, she looked at Will. The man she loved, the man she had fought so hard to stand beside, was staring at her with a mixture of profound confusion and desperate hope. He was waiting for her to deny the allegations, waiting for her to tell his father to go to hell, waiting for her to choose their love over the threats of a tyrant. But Melissa knew the truth. She knew the dark secrets of her mother's past, and she knew that Dollar Bill Spencer never made empty threats. The realization that she had lost everything crashed down upon her with the force of a tidal wave. With hot, bitter tears streaming down her face, ruining her immaculate bridal makeup, Melissa turned her head to look at Will one final time. Her eyes were a tragic, heartbreaking canvas of profound sorrow, desperate apology, and absolute defeat. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer some semblance of an explanation, but the words died in her throat. There was nothing left to say. The battle was over, and the Spencer patriarch had won. Without uttering a single word of explanation to the man she was seconds away from marrying, Melissa slowly backed away from the altar. Her hands trembled as she released her grip on Will's fingers. She dropped her exquisite, cascading bridal bouquet, the vibrant white flowers hitting the cold marble floor with a soft, tragic thud that echoed in the silent church. Grabbing handfuls of her flowing white gown, Melissa hiked the heavy fabric up to her knees, turned on her heels, and ran. She fled down the center aisle, sprinting past the stunned guests, past the imposing figure of Bill Spencer, and burst through the heavy oak doors, disappearing into the bright California sunlight and leaving a stunned, breathless silence in her wake. Will Spencer was left standing completely alone at the altar, a forsaken, humiliated groom amidst the shattered ruins of his own wedding. The confusion that had initially clouded his mind evaporated, instantly replaced by a blinding, volcanic fury. He stared at the empty doorway where his bride had just vanished, his mind struggling to process the catastrophic betrayal and the sudden, violent end to his future. He slowly turned his head to look at his father, his eyes burning with an intense, unadulterated hatred. Will collapsed to his knees right there on the altar steps, his hands balling into tight, trembling fists. He unleashed a guttural, agonizing scream of pure rage, a sound that tore through the cathedral, directing all of his profound heartbreak and explosive fury at the ruthless, unforgiving cruelty of his father.